Kia ora everybody, and I'm from Whenua Moimoia, the land of the dreaming. That's where I was raised, but also to a Kiwi mum from Geraldine, and yes, neighbours of Barkers, indeed. So we have that heritage as well. But what I really wanted to just share is some perspectives. It's like I said, it's like taking my family photo album to the cousin's house. So you'll see bits of yourself in this, and you'll see bits that are slightly different, but I hope it's kind of like tupper style. And I promise I do have a wee handout, so there'll be a lot covered, but if there's anything that you want in terms of the words and the background, I've got those for you. Risk management. As Lone was saying, this is really where it's at, and this is what our families need to share in common. And so from the Work Health and Safety family, we share in our Swiss cheese, and that's really the idea that we have to have our people factor under control. That's our active factor, and also, I guess, initially the whole idea that systems would save the day, and if we had enough processes and pieces of paper and checklists and walkarounds, that we could save lives. So we too have our beautiful cycles, and we too have adopted more recently in our systems plan, do, check, etc. So you can see that the idea of having a system and that idea of creating that vision and trying to follow through and continuously improve is very much the same. But what we found in our field, and this was to do with large scale industrial incidents and mortalities, was really, we got to a point somewhere in the 90s, I guess, where we realised that, gosh, you know, these companies that have such wonderful systems, and then something would blow up and kill a lot of people. And we were trying to figure out what it is. So James Reason said, well, there must be something to do with culture there that we're not pinning down. And so he produced, to complement his Swiss cheese, this safety culture model. But what we found is it didn't really come with a user guide. It's very nice, it's like, oh yeah, I think we've got a bit of that, and I think we've got a bit of this, but the how wasn't really there, or even how to sequence it. And even today, we're really grappling, just like you all are, how do we get it done? Around the same time, there was a guy called Patrick Hudson, and he was also researching large-scale incidents. And what was interesting about what he did was he was really interested in diagnosis. So this is helping an organisation to find themselves and at least figure out where they are. So, you know, pathogenic, they don't care, they keep, you know, having incidents, they keep killing staff, they're not a learning culture, right through to generative up the top. And I think it was really interesting hearing from Vincent earlier about that kind of what we would call collective mindfulness. And we ourselves, we just call it constant worry. You know, you've got to be worrying. If you're not worrying, something big's about to happen. That's what we say in Work Health and Safety. So that constant worry, there are scholars who've spent time in collective mindfulness and how to get that organisationally. So again, we struggled. We go, okay, so we are reactive. We do what we're told. Something goes wrong, we try to fix it. But again, how do we get to the next step? We don't really know. And then this guy, Sidney Decker, came along, and he said, you're all wrong. We need anarchy. And we all went, oh God, we've just spent so much time convincing our leaders that we need systems and paperwork and workflows and all these types of things. But what he's really saying, and he came from the healthcare sector where it was patients who were dying, and helping coach in the health sector. But what he actually said was, it's about getting people to truly deep down care, and then from that place of care, you can operate your systems. And I think we've heard from Felicity today about that. It's really, if you're living it, you can make it happen. I'm putting this one just here because this guy's an expert on you're going to have a problem next week. And I've highlighted the ones in red that are about culture, but check through your checklist, and if any of you feel like you're ticking a couple of those, feel free to see me in the break, and I'll because impending doom is coming. But basically, if you have your staff looking for issues, I liked that Lone said about the 2 ears and the 1 mouth, you know, listen to your staff. They're at the front line. They know when something's not quite right, And if we empower them to be able to talk to us about that, we can learn a lot. So we had the black box. I would say most work health and safety people are still grappling with the black box. We know what it looks like when it works, but trying to coach others to get there is tricky. So I thought it would be useful for us to take a step back for a minute and go into, probably, you know, you were out there, you've done your MBA, some of you, just to take you back, because we heard some of this today, that constant battleground between managing the production line and having appropriate incentives versus really empowering our workers from the inside and how they're feeling. And it does have large implications, and I think Lone was speaking to that in terms of how much you're incentivising and rewarding versus how much you're actually just having to have it from the inside at the same time. And so it's our assumptions about our people that then influences how much we care about retaining them, because if we're going to make our training investment, we've really got to be thinking about retention. If we're not caring about retaining our frontline staff, we're probably not going to go down that way. And if we're just going to incentivise for the short term, is that really about care? Is that going to get what we want? And at the long term, it's really sometimes just having a chat about your managers, your leaders, about what their motivation orientation is as well. We often find in work health and safety that it's having the chat to actually understand the perspective that someone is carrying within them when they go to have their discussions. And I think that sometimes explains what Felicity was saying in terms of, in some places we got it and it works, and in other places it doesn't. And that can just be what people are holding in their head and the beliefs that they're holding in about their management style. Like I said, tapas style, so pick up your beer and maybe pick this one up. So I'm sure many of you have heard about transformational leadership, but we definitely heard about it from Lone, and we definitely heard about it from Felicity today. That's the idea that your leader needs to be out there front and centre, valuing your food safety and integrating it into how you do things around here and their behaviours, because them signalling at the front is this idealised influence, and it gets mimicked throughout your organisation. At the same time, we need to be inspiring our staff to make it attainable and achievable. So things are going to go wrong. You know, Felicity said not everything landed well, but it's about the fact that we're not seeking perfection, we're seeking improvement, we're wanting to get closer to where we need to be. Self-determination theory, don't expect you to read the slide, but I'm sure many of you are all over this already. But the whole point here is that we're moving people from down one end where they're disinterested and they're not caring what you say and want them to do, through to they're living it. Okay? And if we do, particularly in work health and safety, but also I imagine in your environments, if we do this really well, you can't leave it behind. You know, it's like me yesterday. I was trying to fly into Hamilton and the plane didn't land and there was cloud, and then we took back off, and I wanted to applaud. I know Kim didn't. She was like, I can see the ground, I want to land it. I was like, no, he's following protocol. This is the best day of my life. I'm the safest that I could ever be. She's like, no. I have to, Kim. It also means that I can't walk by a carpet that's a bit floppy or something anymore, because I know that it comes down to me, okay? And everyone has to feel that. Not particularly my area, you know, I'm sure Miranda will know a lot more about this, but I did want to share in that from business perspective some of the other things that in our pick and mix today. So I think maybe it's the summertime reading, you know, social cognitive theory, the acquiring and retaining. You know, we might need to, in our organisations, have some people do some learning in and around that. Theory of planned behaviour. So this is another one which relates back to our transformational leadership. It also relates back to a lot of what Lone was saying about, you know, if you're holding the idea within you, you might know what's right, but you need to feel that you're supported by your co-workers to implement that. You also need to feel that your senior leader is in your head when you're making that decision, and you know that they've got your back if you have to stop the line. And so it's really about having people be able to know what the values are, know what the right thing to do is, you've empowered them to do that, and have that ability to make that decision, have that outcome, and feel essentially psychosocial safe. Really comes back to that again. You've got to feel safe at work. So in the cheat sheet here, the theory of planned behaviour, why I think it's an interesting one, is that it draws together a lot of those others that we were discussing earlier, whether that's the leadership style or whether that's basically drawing in our values. And again, coming back to what Felicity was saying about it being cyclical, there's some nice models out there about stages of change. But as I said, I'm not here to teach and preach each of those. It's more that you might go, oh, that one might be interesting to go and follow up on. It might be something relevant to where you and your organisation is at. But I think here we've got to really acknowledge that there's some other experiences and knowledges in the room that I think we haven't really, through our theory lenses, that's good and well, but we also have mataranga Māori that we can be drawing on. And I think this is particularly important when we look at in the health and safety environment for us. It's an emerging area when we look at the demographics of who is working in this workforce and what could we be learning in order to create those social, cultural environments, okay? And if we look at the demographic change, it becomes even more critical to understand how our workforce might be engaging with each other. And this is particularly important because, yes.
I was just going back to the Mātauranga Māori.
Yes.
That's quite interesting to hear. Just going talking about food safety. Things like alcohol and cigarettes, the word we put before those was kai. So we had kai waipiro and kai hikareti, eating alcohol and eating cigarettes. So that's something that our ancestors realised straight away, that the only thing that wasn't considered food was fresh water. And the well-being that fresh water, everything else was considered food. A cup of tea was food because it had something placed into the fresh water. So there's an element of understanding that our ancestors already had about the intake of food into our bodies and the caution that they took around because they knew that's something about that particular type of food had its own risks and hazards. Kia ora.
Ngā mihi nui. Thank you so much. And so I think that's a brilliant example there. But if we think about tikanga, if we think about all the rituals around food and we have conversation with staff, I think there's some really potential interesting behavioural, cultural practices that we can be unlocking in our businesses. And I just really wanted to share that there might be people in the room who are interested. It was here in Kirikiriroa in 2023 that the work health and safety folks began to engage with this. And I certainly think that Indigenous risk management, it's certainly not appearing in any of our legislation in Australia and New Zealand. So I think we really, I get excited, I'm an academic, so I go, oh, it's so interesting to go find out more. So really, next steps from here, things that you might want to take away is really to consider that Mataranga Māori perspectives and talking to your staff about that. Self-determination theory, I think again, it's about these common values around food and how we treat it and respect it. You might think about having chats to your leaders about the types of behaviours that they need to display and making safety tangible. And also, I think what I've come from in this reflection is really, I want to hang out more with social marketers. I think they've got a lot to offer our business in terms of internal messaging. I think they can help our leaders say the right things in the right places. I think they can read a room really well. So, yeah, I just saw another connection myself. So, thank you so much. But I wanted to just share in two final insights. I'm not going to play them here. But in work health and safety, we get excited about these two videos. The first one is a business who draw the line, and the video, you can look it up at some time, it's called Wasn't Me. And it's actually filming in a factory environment where they're kind of jokingly, wasn't me is to blame for everything. And then eventually what they do is wasn't me gets walked up to the office and he gets fired, and they say, after today, you can't say it wasn't me. All right, so the line was drawn in their cultural practice, and from that day forward, they had to keep moving forward. Another example is the safety wrap, just a really good way of empowering staff in the front line to develop the training for their fellow staff. They use fun and humour and music to do that, and I think that's why it really works. And free book everybody. So this is an open access resource that I produced, but it does talk about psychosocial safety, and feel free to share it with any of your safety colleagues. And I do just have a couple of brochures if people are at all curious. Thank you so much. Kia ora.